And scientists like me had no doubt in their minds about where this was going once we saw what was happening in China. This administration didn't want to admit it. When I sounded the alarms to make masks to protect our healthcare workers, they resisted. When I sounded alarms to start vaccine development, they resisted. When I sounded alarms to buy swabs, the essential component for the test, they resisted. So when I spoke up about the dangers of chloroquine and hydroxychloroquine and the recklessness that our public health political officials were doing to push this drug out, to flood the streets, is the note I saw from the White House. Directive, flood the streets. That was the straw that broke the camel's back for me. I could not sit by and be complicit and watch people in danger, and watch people die. I had to speak up. When I did, they pushed me out. 25 years of vaccine and drug and diagnostic development kicked to the curb, to the NIH, demoted, ridiculed, as you said, disparaged in every way, called a deserter. My record speaks for itself.
Stay right there. I have more questions for you. I'll be asking more about the whistleblower complaint and why Bright says this winter could be the darkest winter in modern American history. Stay with us.
You have big plans for you. Eating well, losing weight, and living a healthy lifestyle. That's the goal. But this stuff is tough, and it's easy to feel like you don't have what it takes to change. Here's the secret, though. It's all in your head, and Noom can help show you how to unlock it. Based in psychology, Noom empowers you with the wisdom to understand the why behind your decisions, so you can make healthier ones. Here is how it works. First, go to Noom.com/CNN News and answer a few easy questions about your health and weight loss goals. And then, start Nooming. Noom will help change your relationship with food, and it conveniently fits into your life. So you can look up recipes, read an article, and log your meal anytime, anywhere. Sign up for your trial today by visiting Noom, Noom.com/CNN News. Change your thinking, change your habits, and change for good with Noom.
We're continuing our interview in our health lead. You just heard senior vaccine scientist Rick Bright say that more Americans are going to die from coronavirus because scientists are being sidelined by the Trump White House. 6 months ago, Bright filed a whistleblower complaint claiming he had been demoted from his job at the Department of Health and Human Services for complaining about political interference in science. This week, he resigned from government altogether. This is his first interview. You faulted specifically political operators in the Trump administration for not taking the pandemic seriously enough. Who specifically are you talking about? Are you talking about HHS Secretary Alex Azar?
Absolutely. I think it cascaded all the way down from the White House, from the President Trump to the Vice President. Those on that White House task force moved into the department of Secretary Azar and the Assistant Secretary for Preparedness Response, Dr. Bob Kadlec.
Last night, Vice President Pence would not answer the question when asked by Susan Page as to why the death toll for coronavirus is so much higher in the United States than for any other country, and our death rate is higher than for any other wealthy country. As someone who is inside the administration, can you answer the question? Why? Why are we doing so much more poorly than any other comparable country?
Because of failed leadership. Because of a reluctance to admit there was a problem, because of a reluctance to tell America the truth, because of a reluctance to take critical actions up front. It disgusted me last night to hear Vice President Pence try to say that President Trump did all he could by putting in a travel ban from China in January. That is the only thing they actually talk about that they ever did. That alone was so insufficient to get in front of this virus. They don't recognize that many people, hundreds of thousands of people, were already coming into our country with this virus. So that one small travel ban, that's the only thing they hold out that they did, was not enough. And they deny the fact that if you do take a step, such as a travel ban, that is called an attempt to contain the virus outside the country. When you contain and try to hold off the spread of a virus, you must be doing something else in the background to prepare for a breach in that containment. The virus breached that containment very quickly, and we weren't doing anything else to mitigate, plan for mitigation. And that is where this administration failed most.
In May, you said this could be the darkest winter in modern history. It's now October. More than 211,000 Americans have been killed. More than 7.5 million have been infected. Cases are going up or staying steady in most states. What are you afraid is going to happen in November, December, January?
This winter, we're going to have an explosion of cases of coronavirus. This winter, we're going to have an explosion of influenza infections and other respiratory infections. It's going to overwhelm our healthcare system again. We still don't have enough personal protective equipment for our doctors and nurses. We still don't have enough tests. We're still not doing enough testing. We still are not delivering and leading by example those critical measures. So one of these things, coronavirus, is going to be compounded by influenza, compounded by other respiratory viruses, and it can be absolutely disastrous. And it doesn't have to be.
Last question, sir. It sounds as though you're saying that President Trump has blood on his hands, the blood of tens, if not hundreds of thousands of Americans. Is that what you think?
I believe President Trump and this administration has failed America, failed to respond to this pandemic, and many people have died needlessly. There were many lives that were lost that we could have prevented. And there are many more lives that we're going to lose this winter that are preventable if we just had strong leadership, we just had truth and transparency coming from our White House, and people who lead by example. So short of them doing that, it's criminal. More people will die. And I believe that from the bottom of my heart.
Rick Bright, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. Our other breaking news today, the Michigan governor is pointing her finger at President Trump after the FBI stops a plot to kidnap her and overthrow the government. Stay with us. Breaking news internationally, the FBI says they have stopped a domestic terrorist group, a militia plot to kidnap the governor of Michigan and overthrow the government. Michigan's Democratic Governor Gretchen Whitmer addressed this last hour, blaming hate groups that she said heard the rallying cries of President Trump, as CNN's Jessica Schneider reports.
I knew this job would be hard, but I'll be honest, I never could have imagined anything like this.
Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer speaking out against the alleged plot to kidnap her.
You don't have to agree with me, but I do ask one thing. Never forget that we are all in this together.
Today, the FBI charging 6 men in the conspiracy, saying the group plotted to kidnap the governor from her vacation home before the election. Authorities became aware of the scheme as they monitored social media and discovered a group of men based in Michigan mapping out how to violently overthrow government officials and target law enforcement.
The alleged conspirators used operational security measures, including communicating by encrypted messaging platforms, and used code words and phrases in an attempt to avoid detection by law enforcement.
Law enforcement was able to track the group by using informants and undercover agents who recorded the men when they visited the governor's vacation home 2 times.
Fox and Croft, in particular, according to the complaint, discussed detonating explosive devices to divert police from the area of the home. And Fox even inspected the underside of a Michigan highway bridge for places to seat an explosive. The complaint further alleges that Fox purchased a taser for use in the kidnapping and that the group successfully detonated an improvised explosive device wrapped with shrapnel to test its anti-personnel capabilities.
State officials announcing separate terrorism charges against 7 other men linked to a militia group, saying they plan to instigate civil war, target police officers, and storm the Capitol building in Lansing, taking hostages, including Governor Whitmer.
All of us in Michigan can disagree about politics, but those disagreements should never, ever amount to violence.
Whitmer has been a frequent target of President Trump over her coronavirus response, Trump saying this at a rally in her state last month.
You'd be doing even better if you had a governor that knew what the hell she was doing. You got to open up the state.
And tweeting, "Liberate Michigan" in April. Protesters and militia, some armed, have even gathered at the state capitol, calling for an end to Whitmer's stay-at-home order. The governor today blaming Trump for escalating the rhetoric.
Stand back and stand by. Hate groups heard the president's words not as a rebuke, but as a rallying cry, as a call to action. When our leaders speak, their words matter.
And Republicans around Michigan have rallied in support of Governor Whitmer. She, of course, is a Democrat. In fact, the state GOP chair putting it this way, saying political disputes should be settled at the ballot box, not by violence. But, Jake, so far tonight, there is absolutely no word from President Trump on all this. Jake?
All right, Jessica Schneider, thanks so much. In our 2020 lead today, sources tell CNN that aides close to President Trump are trying to get him to stop making baseless claims about voting, such as this today.
You pick up any paper in the country practically, and they're cheating all over the place on the ballot. So how is that not a problem? That's a much bigger problem than China or Russia.
Not true and not true. Foreign adversaries are looking to exploit Trump's frequent lies, according to America's intelligence chief on election security. CNN's Pamela Brown reports in our voting series, Making It Count.
26 days to go until Election Day, and President Trump is showing no sign he will stop spreading misinformation about mail-in voting and voter fraud.
It's a corrupt system because they're sending out millions of ballots.
CNN has learned some of Trump's aides have been trying to steer him away from these baseless voter fraud arguments and instead have him talk about how the mail-in ballots could cause confusion and even chaos. But Trump continues on.
When you send out millions of ballots, when you're the sender, you can send them wherever you want. You can send them to Democrat areas, Republican areas. You don't have to send them at all.
The disconnect between the candidate and the campaign also heard in poll watcher training videos created by the Trump campaign for 17 different states and reviewed by CNN.
Essentially, the key is to behave yourself and not act like a fool.
Now, one of the top U.S. intelligence officials on election security is acknowledging the president's false claims are being used by foreign powers. The director of National Counterintelligence and Security Center, Bill Evanina, telling Hearst Television, if they see a reference made by the President of the United States, a prominent U.S. senator, a business person, someone who America looks at as a voice of reason, and they believe it suits their interests, they will amplify that by 1,000 to make sure that the most amount of people see it. In Florida, Governor Ron DeSantis is fighting an extension of voter registration deadlines after a system outage prevented some people from registering on the last day to do so.
You can have the best site in the world. Sometimes there's hiccups on it.
A court filing from an attorney for DeSantis says extending the deadline might sabotage, perhaps irreparably, Florida's efforts to maintain normalcy during this profoundly abnormal election cycle. Already, more than 5.4 million Americans have cast their votes. This according to CNN and an Edison Research survey of election officials in 31 states reporting voting data.
How will we do it?
Now, a bipartisan group that includes Trump's former director of national intelligence, Dan Coats, is launching a $20 million campaign in several states, telling the public that the election is, quote, safe and secure.
Help make sure every vote is counted, no matter who you vote for or how.
And we have learned the Justice Department is letting prosecutors announce voter fraud investigations close to Election Day. This is an exception made to a 40-year-old policy that deterred prosecutors from making such announcements as to not influence the election. One election expert says this essentially gives the green light to impact the election, Jake.
Of course. That's the point of it. Pamela Brown, thank you so much. In our national lead, we want to take a moment to honor some of the more than 212,000 American lives lost to this pandemic. Today, we are going to remember Julie Davis, a 49-year-old elementary school teacher in North Carolina, considered an inspiration for her young students. Her daughter described her as selfless and caring. Davis died just days after testing positive for coronavirus. May her memory be a blessing. Our condolences go out to her family. Our coverage on CNN continues right now. I'll see you tomorrow.